Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, our first Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast of the new year. We live in interesting times. We've all seen in the news the mine explosion in West Virginia, and it is tragic. Very tragic. But one of the remarkable things about this is that the sole survivors who's in critical condition, his name is McCoy, and the president of the mining company who's been on television is named Hatfield. That is truly remarkable. But the news gives us other interesting things. The Secretary of Labor, Elaine Chao, who has addressed this breakfast, worked very hard to promulgate regulations which required for the first time the disclosure of expenditures of the labor unions. Of course, corporate expenditures have had to be disclosed for a long time, and we are seeing some of the fruits of this required disclosure, because the National Education Association was required to report on who got their $65 million in contributions last year. And who got the contributions of the National Education Association's $65 million? Well, among the dozens of left-wing groups were Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, Amnesty International, the AIDS Walk Washington, and many other organizations. And one wonders what some of the teachers are going to say about what was done with their money. As always, if you would like a copy of today's presentation, all you've got to do is sign up for it or any one of a great number of other taped presentations at these breakfasts, and for a mere $15, our staff will be happy to send you copies of the presentation. In 2004, the Leadership Institute trained 3,802 students at our 35 kinds of schools. 3,802. When we totaled things up at the end of our last school last month, the Leadership Institute had in 2005 trained 6,017 students, a 58% enrollment increase over the 2004 all-time record, and I'm extremely proud that we have been able to do that. We conducted, of the 35 different kinds of schools, 299 schools. Very busy around here. We placed 114 job seekers through our employment placement program. You have before you the first draft, edition of our school schedule for 2006. Please take a moment to review the schools and consider attending one or more of them or sending friends to them. And please keep in mind our program grows and changes during the year, and we'll host many, many more programs than you see on the schedule at your table. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Jenny Thomas, who will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Jenny earned her BA in Political Science from Murray State University in Murray, Kentucky, a school made famous in certain circles by our youth leadership school. And during the 2004 presidential campaign, Jenny worked as a field representative for the College Republican National Committee. And she came here at the Leadership Institute almost exactly a year ago, and she currently serves as the recruitment director for many of the Leadership Institute courses in our core schools department. Jenny, an invitation and pleasure.
Thanks, Morton. I'm glad you're all able to join us. Will you please bow with me? Lord, I thank you for this day, God, just for this opportunity, Lord, to come together so close to our nation's capital, Lord, and just to praise your name, God. And I just thank you, Lord, for the opportunity, Lord, to serve you. God, I pray that you'll be with Senator Cuccinelli, Lord, this morning as he addresses us, God. And as he goes on, Lord, to serve in the Senate, Lord, of the great state of Virginia, God, I just thank you for where we are, God. How you bless our nation, Lord, and I pray that you will be with the families, God, of the miners in West Virginia, Lord. They're very close to our hearts, God, and we know that in the midst of disaster, Lord, you're still in control, Lord. Bless our meal this morning, God, and bless our time together, Lord, and I pray that we will never be ashamed of your name, God. And as we go into the 2006 year, God, that you will be raised above all things, God, and that you will be in our country and our nation, and that we will never stop to praise you and never, Lord, deny who you are and what we know that to be true, God. In Jesus' holy name I pray. Amen. Now please join me for pledge to our flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jenny. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Robbie Zerkelbach. He's going to give us an update on the activities in the core schools department. Robbie is Director of Recruitment at the Leadership Institute. He's also responsible for recruiting students to attend the many Leadership Institute courses offered through the core schools department. Prior to joining us here at the Institute, Robbie was a congressional aide to Congressman Jim Nussle, who is currently chairman of the House Budget Committee. Robbie is originally from Iowa and was a White House intern for current President George W. Bush. Robbie.
Good morning. Today I've been asked to give an update on some of the exciting things that are happening in the Core Schools Department here at the Leadership Institute. For those of you that don't know, Core Schools is composed of 19 of the 35 schools that we have here at the Leadership Institute, and they're all hosted here in these very rooms on this floor. Overall, 2005 was a great year for all of LI, as Morton was saying, but especially for our department. We offered a record number of schools, and we trained more than twice the number of students that our department's ever trained in 1 year. Two of our most popular schools are our Candidate Development School and our Campaign Leadership School. Those are both week-long schools that we offer. These schools boast some of the top candidates and campaign professionals throughout the country. This past December, we had 70 students at our campaign school. The students from this school are working on important races nationwide, such as the re-election campaigns for both Senate and House members, including Congressman John Carter and Congressman Jim Ryan. In addition, our grads are working on key gubernatorial races, such as Ernest Stokes' race for governor in Oklahoma and State Supreme Court Justice Roy Moore's gubernatorial campaign in Alabama. And these grads are also working on numerous state and local races as well. And that's all just from one of our schools that we had last year. As you all know, Morton Blackwell and the Leadership Institute have developed a great reputation throughout the country as being the foremost training institute for conservatives. But Morton's reputation is reaching international acclaim as well. Individuals from all over the world are now flying into Arlington, Virginia to take part in a lot of these training classes that we're offering, especially the campaign leadership and the candidate development schools. In 2006, our candidate and campaign schools trained key candidates, campaign officials, and conservative activists worldwide, including individuals from South America, Eastern Europe, Africa, and countries such as France, the UK, Japan, and of course Canada and Mexico. I'd just like to give you one example of the impact that LI is having overseas. This past summer, 5 individuals from the Republic of Congo attended the campaign leadership school here at LI. One of those individuals was a man by the name of Kabasu Babu Katamundi. Babu, as he likes to be called, is the federal president of the Congolese Rally for Democracy and a very strong conservative. For many decades, the Congo had been ruled by a brutal dictator. Between the years of 1998 and 2003, the Congo was ravaged by a war that left almost 4 million people dead, many from disease and starvation. But things are looking up in this country as people are beginning to experience peace for the first time in many years. This past summer, over 25 million people registered to vote, and just last month, the people voted on a referendum for a new constitution. This was the first free election held in this country in over 40 years. Babu was one of the first politicians to kickstart this campaign, appearing on more than 16 TV stations throughout the Congo. And just yesterday, I talked to Babu on the phone. He told me that it looks like the referendum is going to pass, and that 3 elections for local, parliamentary, and presidential seats are going to be held this spring, probably in March or April. It's a monumental step towards democracy for this war-torn nation, and a great example of the impact that LI is having worldwide. And Babu enjoyed our campaign training so much that he is planning on bringing a group of candidates to our candidate development school next month in February. These are just a few examples of how the Core Schools Department is helping to advance the mission of LI, which is to identify, recruit, train, and place conservatives in all aspects of the political process. Thank you very much.
As president of the American Collegians for Life and the chair of the Virginia Collegians for Life, during the 2003-2004 school year, he founded a conservative student publication called the William and Mary Standard. And this last summer, he worked with our speaker and other collegians on pro-life issues. And Steve is one of the growing number of second-generation graduates of my training. His father, Chris Bromwick, who is a very fine man whom I knew from his student days and trained him, has brought Steve Bromwick upright.
When the Leadership Institute asked me to introduce Senator Cuccinelli, I'd forgotten how early I'd have to get up in the morning. Many of you are probably aware, if you have children or grandchildren my age, collegians are more familiar with waking up, at about this time in the PM and going to sleep about this time in the morning. We have a great speaker this morning. Senator Cuccinelli has been a fantastic leader here in the state of Virginia for our conservative principles. As you know from the program, he was both elected twice, and he helped defeat a tax referendum all in the space of 2 years. But I had the opportunity to meet with him yesterday at an event down in Richmond, and he had mentioned that he was also going to possibly bring up the need to address local issues with the same fervency that we address federal issues. And I just wanted to touch on how he's immensely qualified to speak on that as well, and how he lives what he's going to say. As Morton mentioned, last summer we had an event for pro-life collegians, and our speaker for that event was Senator Cuccinelli. Now, he's a busy man. He's got 5 daughters, and if they're anything like my sister, I'm sure they take up a whole lot of time. So we only figured, he might be able to stop by for 5 minutes, 10 minutes perhaps. But he went far beyond that. Senator Cuccinelli was able to come speak, then he fielded questions, and then he met with students individually. And when he left, they were filled with the fervor and the energy to go out there and fight to create a culture of life, not simply on the federal level, but also the state level and the local level as well, taking care to help bring conservatives into power, into the public policy process on all levels of government. He's also helped my dad out when he ran for the state senate 2 years ago, and we'll be more than happy to help you this Saturday with your fundraiser. Looking forward to paying it back. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Senator Ken Cuccinelli, a great conservative.
Good morning, you all. Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, I've got a different one. Yes. I appreciate the invitation to be here. You may not realize it, the reach and effectiveness of your introducer. I was down in Richmond last night and saw Chris Bromwick after seeing Steve. Chris is his father, and Chris walked up and introduced himself and said, "Hi, I'm Steve's driver." and there are many people who look at it that way. Steve is doing a lot of work in the age group on the life issue that I think is critical to our future. And Steve, I appreciate all that work. You know that's the case, and appreciate all you're doing to advance that critical cause. As a lot of people say, none of the other issues really matter if you don't get out. So, And that age group is really where the fight is. So we all owe Steve a debt of gratitude across Virginia, and really he's reaching outside of Virginia to do spectacular work on what is, without question, the most fundamental issue in America, life. It's the first unalienable right. And Steve, I appreciate your work there. He mentioned his father running for the Senate 2 years ago. I'm going to circle back to this point a little bit, but he got very little help from my Senate leadership. And the simple reason is they didn't want him to win. They didn't want him to win. And that's very important to the tax discussion I'm going to have with you here today to explain why they didn't want him to win. But first, I'm going to talk about two things today. One, they're completely separate. One is y'all's role in state politics. And I know a lot of people here are going to cross the river when you're done eating breakfast here, or you're going to pick up phones that'll cross the river all day. And a lot of you work in the federal arena, in the federal political arena, and you have great impact. But what I've observed, and I used to live here behind the Iron Curtain in Arlington, and what I've observed over the years is that we have an awful lot of conservative brain power and manpower that is so focused on the federal work, federal effort, that they leave us behind here in Virginia. Well, let me ask you a question. How many of you think the federal government is going to bring us school choice in Virginia? No hands. You're all right. How many of you think that the Virginia legislature and our local governments might someday bring you school choice? That's where it's going to come from, folks. That's where it's going to come from. And you can take this as a generic expression of disappointment from someone who is in the state arena at what I often see from our, what I'll call federal conservatives. We need your help here in Virginia, changing things in Virginia, so that Virginia can again lead America to a better government, a government that's the light of the world. But it started here. It started here more than 200 years ago. But we need your help to revitalize what's going on here in Virginia and to lead the next wave of change. In that respect, I appreciate everything you all do here at the Leadership Institute, Morton and Helen. The grassroots work is absolutely critical. You'll see in your program that in my last race, I was the Democrats' #1 target in Virginia. And that's measured in hard dollars, folks. #1 out of 140 races. They spent more money to try and knock me out than they did even on open seats. Fortunately, they did not succeed, and so a lot of other races didn't have money spent on them that might have otherwise. But the fact of the matter is, I'm an anomaly, given how conservative I am, and in Fairfax, of all places. And frankly, when I got to Richmond, the comment I got was, we didn't know anybody could win a campaign like that north of the Rappahannock, forget Fairfax County. So that's kind of the background that I come with, and not the first, even before the first session, I was elected in the summer of 2002, and for those of you who are here then, you remember we had a sales tax referendum here. We had a tax fight before I ever got to Richmond. It's kind of a warm-up, it turned out. But we did much better in that one. And we ran that race, the opposition, out of our house. And being outspent 12-1, it was grassroots that allowed us to win. When we were outspent in 2003 by $200,000, it was grassroots that allowed us to win. And this is a race where we were ecstatic to get the ratio of their spending to ours under 2-1. It was the first time we'd ever done that. In 5 elections, I had 5 elections in 16 months when I first came in, counting that referendum. But we were outspent 500,000 to 300,000, and we won 53-47 in a district that this year Jerry Kilgore got about 41% in. So I've got an interesting 2 years ahead of me, and I'm going to need Steve's help. All right, with that background, let me talk to you about taxes in Virginia. You all know about the tax increase in 2004, It's now a history that's bitter in all of our mouths, particularly given that 3 days after that tax increase was voted on, 3 days, oh, lo and behold, we have hundreds of millions of dollars surplus that year, not the next year, which is the budget we were voting on. That year, right there. Now, Jim Gilmore would tell you that, like a CEO checking his stock every morning, about the first thing a governor does every day is figure out how much money's coming in. They knew that money was there. They lied about it and hid it, which they can do. In our system in Virginia, the governor is very powerful. There's no real legislative oversight. So that's why we have a one-term governor. So they have pretty much exclusive control of this information, and they kept it close to their vest. You can bet that the vote in the House would have been a lot different had they known that they were sitting on top of $500 million surplus a month later. Well, what's happened since then? Of course, there was the surplus. The next year, there was a surplus, and we're looking at another surplus. But that's not good enough. That's not good enough. They want more taxes, and that's what we're going to see this year. But from a Republican, from a conservative standpoint, 2004 was a significant test, and we didn't pass that test. We did not pass that test. It told us we have more work to do here in Virginia. In the 2005 elections, people like Dick Black and Bob Marshall, the only two human beings on earth to my right politically, they were hurt by the 2004 tax increase, even though they were vigorous opponents of the tax increase. Well, now, how can this be? The reason it can be is that Republicans in Loudoun County and Republicans in Prince William County could sleep 20 minutes more on Election Day, or they could go vote for a Republican who wouldn't change the outcome, because all the other Republicans, many of them, were going to raise taxes anyway. So it really didn't change the outcome. And if you're outcome driven, if you want results, heck, might as well sleep 20 minutes. And they did. And Dick Black will not be a delegate next year. And that is a tremendous loss for the conservative cause. I cannot begin to tell you. Jesse Helms might be an easier analogy for some of you in here. Every legislature needs a Jesse Helms. You've got to have one. You've got to have one. And we had two in the House. Bob Marshall was there by himself for 6 years until Dick Black got there. And I'll tell you, that's a heck of a 1-2 punch between those two. Imagine the Senate with two Jesse Helmses. I mean, that's what we had in the House with Bob Marshall and Dick Black. Well, we just lost one, and he didn't retire. And a lot of the reason is the dissatisfaction of sort of casual Republicans, if you will, with the fact that the Republican Party does not stand against taxes anymore. At the federal level, we stand against taxes, but we love spending. We love it. And I'm here to tell you, it's utterly irresponsible to be anti-tax and pro-spending. That is irresponsible. Absolutely irresponsible. And there's no excuse for it. No excuse. I went and sat down with my congressman, who is one of the Cardinals, Congressman Wolf. Worked on his race in 1976. He didn't win that race. He didn't even win the primary. It's the first race I ever worked on. I was 7 years old. Sorry, some of you. He's been there 30 years. Well, he's closing in on 30 years, which is part why he's a Cardinal. He has absolutely lost any sense of restraint with respect to spending. Frank Wolf is one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet on Capitol Hill. He's got a heart of gold, often called the conscience of the Congress for a lot of his international work. But by golly, he is caught up in that appropriations mentality. And I see it in Richmond. The difference in Richmond is we have a balanced budget requirement. Thank goodness. Thank goodness, it's the only thing that holds these folks back. And living in Northern Virginia, growing up here, living with the Washington mentality, I have a taste of both worlds to a certain extent, and it's a big difference. But if we don't stand for fiscal restraint, we don't stand for anything. I was at a function last night, listened to a great pro-life conservative speaker. He's a Democrat. Democrat. You probably heard of him. His name's Zell Miller. The notion occurred to me in the middle of his speech last night that Zell Miller ought to run for president in the Republican nomination in 2008 and walk around and tell everybody, I'm a Democrat and I want your vote. Here's why. By golly, he'd give anybody a run for their money, including Chris Matthews. Remember that? That was fun. That was fun. But if we don't, that is the glue that holds the Republican and the conservative movements together. It's true, and the Republican Party is so dependent now on conservatives. Thankfully, that's been many years' work by many people. One of them right here. It's taken to get there. If we abandon that core thread that runs through everything we do or did, we're going to unravel as a party, and conservatives need to hold people's feet to the fire in that respect. I see an awful lot of what I would call establishment conservatives who really are more pro-incumbent than they ought to be. The most poignant thing anyone has ever said to me in politics was after we won our first nomination battle, still the closest race I was ever in. It was 52.5 to 47.5. 104 votes difference. And the guy who ran churches for us, Terry Weir, we won on from the churches, on pro-life, and taxes. That was it. That's all we did. Did the same thing in the general election. Told the Post we were talking about transportation. They bought it. When we were going in the restaurant in the Victory Party, I encountered Terry on the steps. Now, Terry used to work for Jesse Helms. It just occurs to me. Maybe that's a coincidence, maybe it's not. But I thanked him profusely for all his work. It had been a very intense, short campaign. And he had been an absolute machine. And he looked me right in the eye, and he said, I didn't do this for you. That's all he said. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. He said it about that warmly. And frankly, it was one of the most tremendous reminders I've ever had and will ever have. It isn't about the person, it's about the agenda. And when conservatives lose sight of that, there's no reason to expect anybody else to keep it in mind. If our folks get off the reservation, well, kick them off the reservation. And in 2005 elections, we tried to do that. We had 6 candidates, and frankly, they were overwhelmingly young, inexperienced, varying experiences of their own bringing to bear, but not what you'd expect to see necessarily. One of them, a 27-year-old, two 27-year-olds, one beat an incumbent 2-1 on the tax issue. He had the best male of the campaign. That particular character, Gary Reese, had voted for the first tax increase and against the second one. So you can harken back to John Kerry to guess what that male said. I was for the tax increase before I was against it. And so that made everybody mad. He went out 2-1. That was in my district. And down in Spotsylvania, another 27-year-old didn't get in the race until 2 months before primary day. And he got to 46% against a multi-term incumbent. It's incredible what the power of ideas can do. It is truly incredible. And as we went through those primaries, only one of the incumbents was beaten, but the one down in Spotsylvania said to NBC afterwards, he said, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have voted for that tax increase. that might help us this year. We'll see. He may get the chance to test that theory. He's on the House Finance Committee. 4 conservatives walked out of the Finance Committee in 2004 at the request of the Speaker. And the tax increase came out 10-8. They heard a lot about it. They heard about it from me. They heard about it from a lot of other people. I'm hopeful that they heard so much about it, and some of them were very, very offended, that we would question their motives and really jump on them. They were offended. That's okay. I don't mind offending people. I didn't go to Richmond to make friends, and I've been relatively successful at that in the Senate. It never hurts to make friends, but it's not the goal. And we need those folks to hold fast, and Bobby Orrock is the incumbent I'm referring to, and he is the vice chairman of the Finance Committee, and he voted for that tax increase 2 years ago, and he may well get a chance this year, again, in committee. And the place to beat the tax increase in Virginia is the House Finance Committee. So if you want to figure out who to lobby, start right now, because it's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming. And those are the folks to go after. Don't even bother with the Democrats. 14 Republicans on that committee. That's a quick set of emails right there. You can start doing that now. And those are the folks who are going to decide whether or not you get another tax increase this year, by and large. The question in 2006 is it here we go again? 2004, if you knew the details, what they did was they put forward this big tax increase, $4 billion. And this is the Republicans in the Senate, not me. The Republicans in the Senate. It was 3 times the size of Mark Warner's tax increase. So we successfully made him look like the conservative, relatively speaking. It was unbelievable. And I don't know who drank the Kool-Aid, but there were, in my caucus, the vote on the initial bill, the $4 billion tax increase. Now, we ended up at 1.5, to give you an order of magnitude, and that was the biggest tax increase in Virginia history. We started at 4. The vote in my Republican caucus was 13-11 for it. For it, in favor of it. $4 billion. Just incredible. Just incredible. And so, of course, $1.5 billion was nothing for him to push through. That was a disappointment for him. And what they did was, first thing they pulled out when they got in a fight with the House over what the final package was going to be, was they pulled all the transportation money out. Now, if you're going to increase taxes, let's take that as a given since it's history now, what is the thing, the priority that state government ought to be doing that we're farthest from achieving? Well, it's transportation. And the reason they did it was to let the desperation grow for 2 more years and bring back another tax increase and make it very tough for people like me in these mushy, moderate Fairfax-type districts who are going to vote against the tax increase, but are going to have to deal with a lot of people in an electorate that doesn't really care. It's kind of amazing to me, but they don't. And it's my job to educate them why these tax increases are such a bad idea. And living in Northern Virginia and growing up here, you all know that most people's focus really is on the federal government. When they have pothole or school problems, they look at local government next. But we kind of get lost in the middle there at the state level. I'm not offended, but sometimes I'm appreciative. But the fact of the matter is, voters don't pay a lot of attention to what goes on at the state level. So educating them about why this is a bad idea is very difficult when the leadership of your own party and the governor, who's really got the bully pulpit in Virginia, are out there talking about what a great idea this is. Look at all these great goodies we're all going to get, which of course, as you all know, is how you sell a tax increase. I call it the peanut butter plan. Spread a little bit all over and everybody gets a little something. They tried to do that with the sales tax referendum, but we had the opportunity to educate people there. This was all so fast in the General Assembly that we don't have the opportunity. Virginia General Assembly is the shortest one in the country, and thank God for it. But that year we went 4 months. We stayed over. We had a special set. We stayed long, and then had a special session. We were called into special session for the tax increase. We hadn't passed a budget. And hearkening back to 1995, they were playing chicken over the tax increase with whether we're going to have a budget come June 30th. That's our fiscal year. And what would happen if we didn't have a budget? Gosh, what would we do without government? Well, we'd pay less taxes. Might cause some other problems. But Jay O'Brien and I put a bill in that would do what we have seen at the federal level occasionally, and that's just continue spending out at the old levels until we get a new budget. And they actually didn't kill that bill because they were concerned they might actually need it. Very little reported comment from that fight. So they tucked that bill away. They just tabled it in the Finance Committee in case they had to come back to it. Very interesting. And unfortunately, the Republicans in the House chickened out and blinked. And if we learned anything from 95, it's that the people who shut the government down are the ones who aren't going to do well in the public eye. And they were the ones threatening to shut the government down. And frankly, in my view, well, of course, in my view, we shouldn't have chickened out, but I'd have taken them right to the brink. I'd have gone right over the brink. It's one of the things they love about me in the Senate. Before I got there, they didn't win every vote 40-0. There have been other conservatives there. But I don't think anybody stood up on every blessed bill and told them why what they were doing was wrong. And that they cannot tolerate. They can't stand it. They cannot take seeing themselves in the mirror held up in the light of truth. They cannot stand it. They can't withstand it. They can't debate it. The debates, we don't really have significant debates, but the statements they make are often so outrageous. To give you an idea, the majority leader in the Republican Senate answered my question the same way a month apart. That's how long this battle was going on. The question was interpreting something he'd said on the floor. Did the senator just say that this tax increase is going to be neutral or positive for the economy of Virginia? He's an accountant. Answer, yes. Okay. I'm a Republican. I'm conservative. I understand we need some taxes to operate government. But it is heresy. It is absolute heresy to ever suggest, especially for a Republican, that a tax increase is going to be good for your economy. Frankly, I didn't even argue with him anymore. I just sat down shaking my head. You know, you don't argue with a 2-year-old kind of thing. Now, he's a lot older than I am. He's not a 2-year-old. But if he's got that attitude, we're not going to really have a debate. There wasn't much point to it. He laid out his position right there. I asked him a month later, same answer. Incredibly, well, you see, these deputies who are going to give more money are going to go spend it, and we'll get sales taxes. That was the extent of he fleshed out his logic. That's brilliant, Mr. Majority Leader. I'll have to vote for you again. That's what we're dealing with. This same guy in caucus gave a lecture he called, patronizingly, Econ 101. He's not from the Austrian school. Okay? I'm not sure he knows what the Austrian school is. But this is the leadership we've got now. It's part of why we need your help. Last but not least, in terms of what you might see this year, is the governor. The governor promised not to raise transportation taxes until the Transportation Trust Fund, where they all go, theoretically, is locked up, meaning we can't rate it for other things like education or health insurance and a million other things we've rated it for in the past. Well, I've worked with this guy as lieutenant governor. Nice guy, slippery as can be. Slippery as can be. And I'm waiting to see how he's going to try and finesse this promise. He's going to try and squeak by one way or another. And I think what's happening is the Republicans in the Senate, the leadership in the Senate, is going to not come out with a tax increase. They're going to re-index all our taxes. What does that mean? Well, you know that the sales tax increase in 1986 that we dedicated to transportation, half a penny. Well, it only bought this much back then. Well, we need to increase it to this so that it has the same buying power. Now, we're not increasing the tax, we're just indexing it for inflation. Funny how they don't index some other things for inflation. On the tax side, on the taxes we pay side of the ledger. They're not interested in that. They're not interested in tying state spending to growths in population plus inflation. Oh, but they'll index those taxes. They'll index those taxes. And I think that's the finesse for the governor. And I think that's what you're going to see. Keep this stuff pretty close to the vest. They don't bring me to these meetings. John Chichester, the head of the budget committee and sort of the cabal leader on all these things in the Senate, created his own transportation commission. And so I'm in the habit, along with speaking up on every bill that they don't like, I'm in the habit of making them say no. And so I sent him an email and I said, John, I see you've got this new transportation commission. Could I be on it? No. But I make them say no. I make them say no. They don't get that they'd actually be better off if they did this with me and others like me in the room. Because they'd have already run it through. They might actually get some ideas they can use. That's not how they would not want to proceed. And I think that commission is going to be the source of the tax proposals that we're going to see this session. And they're going to be focused on transportation. You're going to hear a lot about how people were willing to pay $3 a gallon for gas. Of course, that was voluntary. Taxes are not. And they're going to suggest that, a few cents here or there in the gas tax isn't a big deal. So let's just index it for inflation, back to the invention of the automobile. And that's what we're going to be dealing with this year. That's what we're going to be dealing with. That's the big issue. There are a lot of others, but I want to stay a little bit focused here. The tax issue has dominated Virginia politics since 2002, since the sales tax referendum. I am still locally vilified by significant elements of the business community who now have become pro-tax. It used to be the business communities where you went for opposition to tax increases. Now they want them. Fairfax Chamber of Commerce, their political action committee was shocked to learn when they got their scorecard back that I scored higher than anyone in Virginia on their issues without ever knowing what they were. I'm sure some of you deal with, down in Richmond we got the Family Foundation, and you've got the ACU here and NTU, and you've got a whole lot of other organizations that do scorecards. And sometimes those folks will come out and say, this is a scorecard vote. And obviously they're trying to push people in one direction or another. And that's fine. Some of them I appreciate when they do that. But I didn't know what the scorecard was. And these people still can barely stand being in my presence because of that sales tax referendum. and my leadership in defeating him. It is amazing what has happened in Virginia politics in 20 years. 20 years ago, the Virginia Chamber of Commerce would have been the source of anti-tax fervor. And now it's basically been taken over by Mark Warner Democrats, and it's been a conscious effort on their part, and they come out and support every tax increase you've ever seen. It's just incredible. And so now, in addition to Democrats and our own Republican caucus, especially in the Senate, we are now seeing some of the institutions, chambers of commerce in Fairfax and at the state level and others, that are actively engaged in supporting tax increases where 20 years ago, these were the folks opposing them. That's what we're dealing with in Virginia. We conservatives have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. 2007 is a tremendous opportunity in the Senate. Once we break the hold of the current Senate leadership, which is possible in 2007, we can start rolling some very good things downhill. School choice, backing off on taxes, really pushing on the life issue, not having to wonder if the executive order passed by Mark Warner after the election, outlawing in Virginia government discrimination based on sexual orientation toward anything, wondering if we can get the 2/3 vote we need in both houses to be veto-proof in overturning that executive order. As Tim Kaine said, he'll veto any bill that overturns it. He didn't say that before the election, strangely enough.
Yeah, big surprise.
Yes, big surprise. He wasn't going to help us. So that's what we're dealing with this year. That's what you can expect. And if I gave you one action item, it would be to tell all your friends to contact those Republicans on the House Finance Committee. You can find it on the web. Email them all. Tell them you're watching. Tell them you're licking your chops and you've got your checkbook out for whoever runs against them if they don't vote against the tax increase. That'll get Bobby Orrock's attention. So he says. We'll see. And don't forget the speaker. He's a good man, but it's kind of hard to tell how he's leading that caucus sometimes. He's the one who asked those 4 conservatives to leave in 2004 for the committee vote to get out. And we need to make sure that he is a fighter for us. And one way to make sure that happens is for you all to contact him and to get other people to contact him. It could be email, be a phone call to his office, it can be any number of things. I don't need to tell you how to do that. But I would appreciate your help in that regard, because I know, I'm going to fight in the Senate, but I know the outcome. I know the numbers. I know where that's going. There may be some pleasant surprises for us in moving things our way, but this fight is going to be won or lost in the House. All I do is tee it up for them. It's the best I can do in the Senate right now. But, you know, we get the Chris Bronlicks elected. Dave Hunt ran here as well against Toddy Puller and Janet Powell, 2 flaming liberals, and our leadership wouldn't help either candidate. That's up here. We'll have a seat in Prince William we can take. We're fighting right now over Bill Mims' Senate seat. It's going to be a special election, and it's 20% Fairfax, 80% Loudoun District. And Bill is a solid pro-lifer, but he was with him on the tax increase, and he's no good on gun control. So we have a real opportunity to move that seat to the right. We need help to do it. So for those of you that are used to engaging in the federal side of things, I'd ask you to put a little bit of your time and treasure and personal effort into some state politics, because we can change things here in Virginia. We are really so close. So close. In 2 years, we could do so much in Virginia. We have so much opportunity here to really have a rebirth of the Reagan Revolution right here in Virginia. And it's something that I hope you'll engage in. I know that I put every bit of sweat equity I can into it. And I appreciate all your participation on behalf of the conservative cause at every level. But I'd ask you to focus a little bit on Virginia. You can make an impact even here behind the Iron Curtain.
Governor.
Don't tell my wife that.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, and I mean this obviously in a very positive way, if you don't have tax increases, then how do you deliver the message that you're going to provide the services, that people want? I'll let you, think about that, because there's so many different things that people want. And it seems to me you overload a budget when you start thinking about this is my best program, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you do that? Because not in your presentation, I didn't hear you say, here are some alternatives to tax increase.
Okay, an excellent point, and one that is complicated to communicate, frankly. It's challenging to communicate. We tried to do things like Tabor bill, which I put in and was defeated, that would index the growth of government. That's indexing I can live with. This year, to take one example, Central Education Bureaucracy, just Richmond Department of Education bureaucracy, budget is slated to go from $76 million to $120 million in 2 years. That's what's in the governor's budget. Now, I promise you, enrollment is not going up 2/3 in Virginia in the next 2 years. And when you pull out large examples, I mean, we can all find $100,000 in Planned Parenthood. We can all find the small amounts. But when you pull out large examples like that one, that are obvious without further explanation, that's just too much, too fast, there can't be a good explanation for it. You have to use those examples. And I really prefer to argue on the philosophical level than to get down and nitty-gritty and, have Janie come in and say, oh, I really need this or I don't need that. Just tug at the heartstrings. That's not the way to set policy. And the truth of the matter is, there is a general notion, which we used to advantage in the 2002 referendum, that government doesn't spend money well. I do have a concern, especially here in Northern Virginia, that the mentality of the American people is changing, and that they really are looking more to government to solve every problem first. And that is a habit we need to break people of. And the only way to break them of it is to stop doing it and surviving the next election. But you got to have the guts to do that in the face of a re-election. But that's your opportunity. In my mind, those re-elections are the opportunity when people are actually paying attention to your explanation. I don't believe, there's two types of leadership. There's kind of leadership that says, well, what's my district want? And then goes and does it. And then there's the kind of leadership that I practice that decides what ought to be done, goes and does it, and at the next election I explain why I did what I did. And I do it as I go along as well, because I really believe in trying to convince people of these things. And, until we have the guts to take these on and roll the dice on explaining them articulately as to why it makes sense not to increase the central education budget by 2/3 in 2 years, and what else we might do with that money, for instance, nothing, or move it over to transportation if you want to talk in terms of prioritizing within the budget. Until we do that, we're not going to win the battle. It's part of, Jerry Kilgore didn't want us to come out and say I'd roll back those tax increases, because he didn't want to confront the question of exactly that you described, people who are getting things, getting goodies, being upset. And he didn't want to confront that. And until you're ready to take that on, that mentality on, we're going to see government growth creep at a pace faster than family incomes and so forth for a long time into the future. That's where we have to stop it. We have to change people's mentality. Government isn't there to do what you want. That is not what government was for. Government is for the purpose of preserving the unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. End of story. And we've gone way beyond that. Everybody's familiar with the unalienable rights. Blah, 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 listed all three. The next sentence in the Declaration of Independence says, this is why we have government. We are so far beyond that principle that our founding fathers must be absolutely disgusted. In the middle of the 1790s, James Madison said, I can't put my finger on that part of the Constitution that allows these sorts of beneficent and charitable expenditures. Can you imagine? What he would think now? What would he think now? Yes, sir.
Last question.
Okay.
Haven't property values created a cash cow of taxes or of revenue for the government? I mean, why do they, the state government, why do they need additional taxes on top of that?
Property taxes are a local tax. The state gets nothing out of it. What they do is generate, strangely enough, a greater demand. There's sort of a tax momentum, if you will. And the state actually has trouble coming in over the property tax to raise taxes. And I'll tell you that when I was knocking on doors in 2002, when we had the sales tax referendum on the ballot, and during my special election, I beat the sales tax with the property tax.
Okay.
I'd go in and say, well, how much has your property tax gone up? Why do they need more money? Because it's staying local. And there's nothing to stop Fairfax County and Arlington County and all the localities from spending their money on transportation. Nothing stops them from doing that.
Good point.
Nothing. And I've lived in my house in Centerville for 5 years, and my taxes have doubled in 5 years. I mean, that is appalling. It's appalling. And yet, you know, in 2003 in Fairfax, we hoped people had crossed the limit of what they could take. And we ran a campaign for the boards of supervisors in the hopes that people had hit their limit in Fairfax, and they had not. They hadn't. Truth is. You know, so you do have a local-state interplay in that regard. But up here, we're taking a beating, an absolute beating. And we're not alone. Southeast Virginia, outside of Richmond, they're seeing the same phenomena. Where you have growth, particularly where you have low unemployment, indicator of job demand, you have supply and demand in your housing market. What a shock. How about that? We can't legislate that law, although they try. They try. Again, not from the Austrian school. But the fact of the matter is you do have these market influences that they take advantage of. And we all know about the malarkey between talking about tax rates and actual dollars out of your pocket. Hey, we cut the rate 13 cents. Well, great, why did my taxes go up $400? Well, because to not make them go up $400, we had to cut it 26 cents. But they don't tell you that. And when I put in a simple bill that automatically knocks the rate down to whatever it would be to not raise taxes, so they can come in and vote after that rate change, if they want more money, they've got to vote to raise the rate. General Assembly that gets none of this money refuses to do it. That's how pro-tax they are. Is they participate actively in the cover-up and obfuscation of the argument that we need to make, we need to be able to make, to explain clearly to the people of Virginia what's happening in their government. They actively hide that information. They don't want the budget readable. They don't want you to be able to figure out what your tax rates ought to be for no tax increase. They don't want you to know. It's incredible. It sounds like paranoia.
Sounds like Enron.
Yeah, well, and they go to jail for it. They go to jail for it. Our folks get reelected. What a great country, huh? And it's as Zell Miller said last night, I heard him say, you know, we've got ourselves the worst form of government in the world here, except for every other one. And it began here in Virginia, and I'm very proud of that fact. And I'll tell you, when you go back to the founding principles, when you talk about the founding principles and a bill before the Senate, the stark contrast is so obvious. No one gets up to debate. They just hope I'll sit down soon. You know, there's no debate. because they can't debate it. That isn't their model of government. They aren't there to implement a philosophical agenda. That isn't why they're there. Many of them don't remember why they're there. They don't know why they came. But they know they like to be able to spend your money. They have a $30 billion a year habit, and it's spending your money. And it's going up to $35 billion a year if this budget passes. That's the course we're on. And unless we're able to articulate a lot of the reasons why this is not a good course, why this is destructive to our economy, why we have hope with an alternative that is more limited, hope for our poor, for our children, and for our community and our economy with an alternative. If we aren't able to articulate that more forcefully over the next couple of years, we are going to continue to lose ground. So that's what I'm engaged in trying to do. I hope you all will be engaged in trying to do it. And 2 years from now, after the 2007 elections, we'll see where we stand in the House and the Senate in Virginia. And you'll have a very good predictor on what's to come, really in the next decade, because those people are going to control redistricting too. So you aren't going to see much change in the House after that point. So thank you all for your time. God bless you all, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Again, as a token of appreciation for your taking time out to speak to us, I'm pleased to present you with the Leadership Institute.
You knew I wore the last one out.
Yes. All right.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you all to join us next month, Wednesday, February 1st. Our Wednesday Wake Up Club speaker will be Tony Blankley, author, columnist, and editorial page editor of the Washington Times. You see him often on TV. You know he's very strong and forceful. It will be an interesting presentation. Any of you who wish a tour of the building, it's available immediately at the conclusion of the breakfast. Christy Meade here will tour you. Step up here, anybody want a tour? Christy will walk you through. I thank you all for coming and appreciate your support of the Leadership Institute.